We now have definitive proof that there is a world of difference between the Big 12, even a depleted Big 12, and the group of five conferences in college football. And it comes to us courtesy of Sam Bradshaw of Sikkim 365, who joins me today on the channel. Welcome in. I am John Kurtz. If you have not subscribed, please do. I'm trying to give the Big 12 a voice here on this channel because there is not much of one nationally right now as we work our way through conference realignment. And on this channel, we talk college football every day. Right now, that means conference realignment, in essence, every single day. Please like the video and comment on it as well. It all really helps me out. So today we are talking to Sam Bradshaw from Sikkim365.com. He does a tremendous job covering Baylor, and last week wrote an awesome piece that you can find, by the way, in the description of this video about the TV numbers between Big 12 schools, the remaining 8 left in the Big 12, and the American Athletic Conference. It's all in response to Stuart Mandel's piece that came out in late July. July 27th, Stuart Mandel ran a piece where he outlined that the TV numbers from the last 2 years, there was only about a 90,000 person difference in terms of eyeballs on the TV sets for games between teams left in the Big 12 and games between teams in the AAC. But it left out a world of context that tells a totally different story, and Sam Bradshaw dove into all of that. So he's going to explain to you just where Stuart Mandel needed some more context, starting right now.
Clearly, I came to a very different conclusion he did. And I think he had a good idea for the article, but I feel like he didn't go far enough with the data in a way that would allow you to really get some insight, because you can make a lot of data say what you want it to, but you need to add more context, not less. And simply taking a 2-year sample where Texas and Oklahoma took almost every appearance on ABC and not normalizing for network, not looking at, all right, what time of day, what day are they broadcast on? Are they on a weeknight? Are they on a major holiday? How many other games are they against? These are all things that wildly influence your television numbers. And I don't believe his article did a good job of accounting for that. And when you look even at the 2-year sample of just 2018 and 19 that he was looking at, even if you look within that year, on ABC, the Big 12 does better. On ESPN, the Big 12 does better. On ESPN2, the Big 12 does better. On ESPNU, the Big 12 does better. And that's in spite of the AAC getting some very favorable television windows. And don't get me wrong, I have a higher opinion of the American Athletic Conference's brands and their quality of play than a lot of people do, which is kind of funny considering this article goes big. But at the end of the day, you're talking about a bunch of schools that they've certainly got more value than people give them credit for. But West Virginia was chosen over all of the old Big East schools to join the Big 12 for a reason. TCU was chosen over SMU or Houston for a reason. If you go to Oklahoma and you go to a sports bar in Tulsa, who's going to get most of the following? Is it going to be Tulsa or is it going to be Oklahoma State? And you can go up and down the list here. And I really don't think that his article went far enough with the data to get a relevant conclusion. And when you look at it based on television windows and based on networks, it wasn't even close.
You touched on some of this here. What to you are the key takeaways from this, at least as far as it relates to the narrative of these teams remaining in the Big 12 and what power or lack thereof they do have in terms of their TV draw?
Well, I think the big takeaway, other than the fact that there is going to be a pretty big pay cut without Texas and Oklahoma, is that there's a big gap between the remaining 8 and the group of 5 conferences. And assuming none of the others get picked up, which we probably won't know for sure on that for weeks, if not months, just because they've got to negotiate the exits with Texas and Oklahoma. If you publicly declare you're talking to another conference, all of a sudden you're on the hook for what Texas and Oklahoma are on the hook for. So assuming I'm correct that nobody else is getting picked up, you should have a league that's going to be kind of a tweener. It's going to be getting a lot more attention than the American, for instance, but nobody's going to pretend that it's going to be on par with the ACC or Pac-12 in terms of television pay. You know, because the Pac-12 is about to renegotiate their deal, and the ACC, they're locked into a long-term deal that's a little bit undervalued, but if it went back to market, you would expect them to get a pretty big gulf between them and the remaining 8. So big takeaway, you're obviously going to take a big pay cut without Texas and Oklahoma, 2 blue bloods. Anybody who loses a couple of blue bloods from any of these conferences is going to be noticed. And then after that, I think assuming the remaining 8 remain together, you'll have the opportunity to add some of the best from the group of 5 conferences. And that should allow you to be a conference similar to what the Big East was when Miami left, where it's still competitive. You're not getting as much as the other conferences that are considered power conferences, but you can still string a season together, make the playoff, and be nationally relevant if you play your cards right.
Yeah. I'm talking right now with Sam Bradshaw from Sikkim 365. Do you feel like the toothpaste is really out of the tube as far as nationally what the narrative is surrounding the schools and their TV value because of that piece from The Athletic? There's no real changing the narrative at this point.
Well, I don't know about changing the narrative because you've got people with very big microphones repeating the same message. It's going to be really difficult to reverse course on that. But, I think really what's going to have to change the narrative long term is they're going to have to strike a solid enough TV deal to give them the resources to compete in the big 2 sports, at least at some level. And from there, are you going to win? People went from thinking, okay, the Mountain West, it's an afterthought. Oh, aren't they the WAC? Oh, they left the WAC, to where by the end of the 2010s, with what Utah did and what TCU did, and to a lesser extent, BYU, you had some nationally relevant wins, and nobody considered them to be a power conference, but there was at least a modicum of respect there. And you're talking about a much deeper roster in terms of programs here. If you do the same thing here, you'll have an opportunity to get some respect.
What would you say to those that try to prop up, speaking of narratives, a narrative that, hey, a lot of the TV value in the remaining 8 schools that was there is based on the fact that peripherally Texas and Oklahoma are in the same conference, right? And the implications of that and what it means to those schools, and that you take that away, there's going to be less actual value there.
I wouldn't necessarily say Texas and Oklahoma per se. I do think there's the benefit of certain programs do a good job of their fan bases watching other games that are relevant to the race. So I think there's some degree of that, but I think it's massively overblown. And I think the biggest impact is not necessarily that you're in a conference with Texas or Oklahoma for those games that don't involve them. I think it's the biggest impact is you're in a conference that has a realistic chance to make the playoff or to make the BCS title game. So games like 2013 Baylor Oak State got a big number. Or for instance, Kansas State, Oklahoma State 2011 got a decent number. Games that get national attention because there's national stakes involved. So as long as you're still a conference that has a platform to do so, and there's a lot of things with the new playoff format that have to be hashed out. So whoever the commissioner is, assuming it's Bowlesby or whoever else, if the schools decide to make a change, they've got to make sure that they have a seat at the table that's much more than what the group of 5 is dealing with right now. That's the key, in my opinion. With Texas and Oklahoma, you have the giant fan base that would make that a sure thing. Here, you've got to make sure that your level of play, your level of competition is sufficient to justify that respect.
Talking with Sam Bradshaw from Sikkim 365, covers Baylor, wrote a great piece that you should all read, and you can find on my Twitter account at JL Kurtz about the TV numbers in the Big 12. The last thing I would ask you here, how much of a discernible difference is there between the remaining schools in the Big 12 individually and their TV value? For instance, if you're trying to shop yourself to another conference out here, is there a school? Is it Oklahoma State? Is it Baylor? Is there a school that could say, hey, look at our TV numbers, we are this much better than the rest of the pack?
Well, I don't see a huge gulf between the different schools, and a lot of it is you're dealing with schools that historically, prior to Bill Snyder, Kansas State wasn't a huge winning program. And, Baylor historically is around 500. So I believe Oklahoma State's in that same boat, but I haven't checked that. Tech's similar. TCU had 30 years of really struggling before Franchione and then Patterson have taken them on a great run. You've got some programs that have been nationally relevant over the last decade, but don't have the long-term roots in the ground, with the possible exception of West Virginia. So as far as television numbers, most, if not all of these schools are going to really be driven by how are they doing this year. So I see them having the potential to do some pretty good numbers, but also, if you're struggling every year, it's not going to turn out for you. I mean, Kansas is the quintessential example. I don't find it surprising at all that the school that made a bowl game every year in the sample and the school that never made a bowl game in the sample were first and last in the ranking when I put that on there in terms of comparing league games. As far as who adds value to what league, I think that's going to be a combination of what is that league looking at, not only from a sports or television standpoint, but, are they looking at postgraduate research? Are they looking at academic affiliations? Are they looking at television markets? There's a number of different things. Gut feel, and I'm obviously biased. I think the schools in Texoma and the historic brand of West Virginia are probably the ones that are being looked at most from a television standpoint. But as I just mentioned, there's a lot of factors that go into it. And right now, I don't think anyone's going to get picked up, just because I think the schools that geographically make the most sense, they've got the most blue bloods, and the payout per school is so high. It's going to be really, really difficult to justify expansion with what they're dealing with currently, at least going after some of the remaining 8. And assuming everybody remains together after it's done, you have the chance to build a pretty solid league. And at the end of the day, if you can, it's not going to be fun losing Texas and Oklahoma off the schedule. But if you can add some solid teams and play the vast majority of whoever else you were playing, that is far from the worst possible outcome we've thought about in realignment over the last decade. So,
yeah, no doubt. Agree with you there. Sam, really appreciate the time. You can follow him on Twitter. It's at Baylor_S11. Sam Bradshaw with Sikkim 365. Really appreciate it. Hopefully we'll talk to you soon and enjoy the start of college football season coming up here.
Sounds great. Thanks for having me on.
Very much appreciate Sam Bradshaw's time. You can find a link to follow him on Twitter here in the description, as well as, again, if you want to read the full article, which you should, there is so much more than what we just covered in that interview there. Definitely check that out as well. You can also follow me on Twitter at JLKurtz, and you can find the links to any of my content in the description of this video as well. Please like and comment. If you disagree, if you think we're awesome, let me know in the comments, and like the video as well. And please do subscribe if you have not already. All right, guys, take care, and I'll talk to you soon.